You know, I've seen so much devastation in my life, horror, sometimes up close, on broadcasts and reading in papers. But I must tell you, I don't know the last time that my emotions have been so moved watching the devastation in Texas. You know, I know your heart, as mine, goes out to everyone who's just been affected by this flood, and especially the Camp Mystic family and those who keep searching for their loved ones, because it's no longer a search and rescue, it is a search and recovery. And so this country's heart just breaks for the victims in Texas and their families, and people have to watch this horror as a parent, as a loved one. You know, this is just so much more than a storm. It's just it's a severe heartbreak. And to many of the Texas families and people who around the world, you hear about these tsunamis and these floods, and we don't always put it in perspective until it happens in our backyard. You begin to realize that they face unimaginable pain. There's just really no words that can really fill the emptiness left by the loss, nor comfort that can erase the anguish of what is being endured by those who see it firsthand and those that watch it around the world. We just have to hope that their hope never fades, and that the love that they have and the love that we give them is stronger than the pain. And prayerfully, with time, they can find some peace, some understanding, some comfort. And we ask God Almighty, as we strive to comprehend the catastrophic destruction that this flooding inflicts upon the people's lives, your heart can't help but to overflow with compassion. And we ask that you be with all who have suffered loss in floods, guiding them toward some hope and renewal, whatever that is for them. And so what we have to do is lean on one another and on that unshakable hope that we have in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and know that he's too wise to make a mistake and too just to do wrong. And while we cannot always understand his ways, there's nothing new under the sun, but this one is a tough one. Welcome to the broadcast, Your Voice, Your Future. I'm Armstrong Williams. You know, we were in New York City over the weekend, for the 4th of July weekend, and I had an opportunity to talk to New Yorkers to see how they feel about the Democratic nominee and what some people think the presumptive mayor, Zohran Adami, what he represents. And I gotta tell you something. There are a lot of mixed reactions. There are people who actually support his policies, like rent freezing, city-owned grocery stores, heavily taxing the wealthy, and offering free bus services, learning nothing from Venezuela and other socialist countries. And there are some who actually see through the smoke and mirrors, who recognize the realities of these types of policies, which they've seen before, and how reductive they are, and how they end up harming the city's residents more than helping them in the long run. But the consensus for Zohran supporters clearly is that they believe that everyone deserves a free lunch, and that there will be no consequences that trickle down to the rest of the city from his policies if he wins. They don't know, believe, or care that the financial capital of the world will most likely see its largest financial institutions move to more friendlier states, much like how Goldman Sachs and others have moved to Texas. And even, get this, the New York Stock Exchange has also been looking to move. They don't recognize that offering government-run grocery stores that offer heavily discounted groceries, most likely at a loss to the city, will shut out major grocery stores that are able to offer a variety of unique and popular products that city-owned grocery stores can't, because private-owned grocery stores have a profit motive, which is to make their customers happy and make them want to come back, while a city's priorities are just concentrated on providing the bare necessities. They just don't see how freezing rents would make being a landlord and owning property in the city completely unaffordable and will reduce the quality of housing entirely. Sal Greco and Leonard Snipes joined me tonight to talk about this and much more. And Sal, I know this is something that is very dear and near to your heart. Your thoughts?
Well, New York City, Armstrong, is kind of like the low information central. They believe in a lot of these policies mostly because they're being fed or they're being gaslit into believing all of these things can happen. Now, but I do want to stress, Zohran Mamdani's policies are the exact same policies of Eric Adams circa 2021 when he campaigned. They both wanted to defund the police. Eric Adams wanted to defund the police. He said it right on Hot 97. He wanted to take $600 million to $1 billion out of the police budget. And
I tell you, no, Sal, let's not focus on Eric right now. I understand Eric does something to you, but let's focus on Zohran, because I don't even think it's a fair comparison comparing Eric Adams to Zohran. I mean, I just don't think it's even fair, not even close. And I respect your opinion. I just happen to agree with it on this one. But talk about Zohran and what people don't realize about who this guy really is.
Well, listen, first of all, he's been an assemblyman for, I believe, 2 or 3 years. He has not been seen in the assembly for about 6 to 7 or 8 weeks. He wasn't there. He barely voted on any bills. So he's been an absentee assemblyman, but he was running a grassroots campaign. He outworked the other people. The thing is, again, in New York City, I want to stress that people vote, majority in New York City, they vote on their hatred. You had the highest voter turnout in New York City since 1989. The voter turnout, I believe, doubled what 2021 was, with about 7 candidates in that race as well. A lot of these policies resonate with the youth, we'll say, the young people in New York City. So a lot of that is the enthusiasm from the youth. But these policies, essentially, most of them will not be enacted. In fact, they need approval from the governor. It's just they're selling an empty dream. But he's a good salesman, Mamdani, and he's young. And again, he's rallying the young vote. But I stress, I know we disagree on it, there is no difference between him and Eric Adams. And in fact, I like to stress that New York City, for the last 12 years, has essentially been under a socialist kind of policy, but it's still under the umbrella of capitalism somewhat. Bill de Blasio was the first socialist elected to mayor. I guess people want to forget about that. And there's a lot of fear-mongering with all of this stuff as well, Armstrong. And to say that the police department will be leaving in droves if Mamdani becomes mayor, they actually have left in droves in record numbers under Eric Adams. So there's a lot of low information narratives going out there to control it, and then it's perception management and make it appear as if Eric Adams is the savior of New York City, when clearly he's polling at the bottom. In reality, he has about 3 to 4% of the vote, 28% favorability in New York City, 56% of New York City wanted him to resign. He's got no chance, Armstrong, unless everyone else steps out of the race, which is what he's crying to all his donors there in Long Island, which he was at over the weekend.
Leonard Snipes, what is a candidate like this, if they're successful, when they talk about emptying the jails, handcuffing law enforcement, especially in a big city like New York?
You have people who have tried it in Portland. You have had people tried it in Minneapolis. You've had people who have tried the same sort of policies in cities all throughout the United States, and they have all basically failed. I mean, we've tried to legalize hard drugs, not marijuana, but hard drugs in Portland, and it became a disaster. We had drug overdose deaths went through the roof, and it was just, now they've repealed it. So what you have a progressive agenda throughout the country basically saying get rid of cops, get rid of the different laws, stop being so harsh regarding crime and the justice system, and then 2 or 3 years later they reverse it. It seems to be a fairly common process in the United States in some cities.
Sal, you actually think Mamdani has a chance of winning, but yet you don't think any of his policies can be enacted. We saw something like this similar in Buffalo where the mayor, someone was voted in the primary, and yet people got together and did a write-in, and the write-in candidate, the former mayor, won overwhelmingly. So we've seen that the power of the write-in ballot. I mean, when we were in New York this weekend, Sal, it's all everybody was talking about, how they must save the city. Even though you had young people supporting Mamdani, a lot of people who are more mature, more sophisticated, said whatever it takes, if they had to hold their nose and vote for Eric Adams, that's what they would do.
But again, I like to stress the polls and how everything has been. Poly Market, up until the last day of the primary, was showing Mamdani beat by a wide margin. At one point 4 months ago, he was polling at 3%. Eric Adams never attacked him for anything. Cuomo, they really didn't go after this guy, and somehow he snuck in, and now he's favored to win at, like, I believe 69 to 70-something percent. Because again, New York City is 7-to-1 Democrat to Republican ratio. So you're going to need a lot of independents and moderate Democrats to come over and somehow vote for one of the candidates. Now, I want to stress, 3 Democrats are running in this right now. Mamdani, Cuomo, and Adams. They're not independents. They're Democrats who have crushed the city and the state respectively in Cuomo and Adams. Curtis Sliwa is a Republican. He will get somewhere between 25 to 30% of the vote. If those 3 are basically splitting the Democrat vote, and Eric Adams, I like to state, did not run in the Democrat primary where he would have polled around 4 or 5% and lost. He would have been crushed in the Republican primary against Sliwa. Tell me why the 4th place guy is going to win somehow. This is an illusion. It's one of the greatest. Again, I give it to Eric Adams because he's like a Houdini. He somehow gets away with everything, whether it's a criminal act or he passes some crazy policies like the ACLU. He actually passed this protest law, which is why the NYPD
But
is
Donald Trump endorsed Eric Adams.
Correct, but Donald Trump has a 36% approval rating in New York City, and therefore, whoever he endorses, he basically shoves the dirt on their coffin. So MAGA candidate in New York City for mayor has really no shot because that will only make voters come out in droves. President Trump, when it came to the presidential election, I believe, what did he get in Manhattan? Less than 19% of the vote. I think he got even less than 30% in the 5 boroughs. So his endorsement means nothing, which is why if I was him, I would have stayed out of it. I understand that he, the other day, soft endorsed Eric Adams and also admitted that I helped him out. I think that may come back to bite him come the midterms, and if Congress ends up becoming Democrat, that could be an issue down the road on why he would talk about Eric Adams, but that does not help Eric Adams. And in fact, there's a lot of Republicans and a lot of common sense New Yorkers that are saying, Curtis Lee was the Republican, won the primary. Why isn't he endorsing him? And if the Republicans are so great and big, they didn't run anyone in that primary against Curtis Lee. And Eric Adams could have done it. Why didn't he run? Because he would have lost.
Hold that point. Your voice, your future. Snipes and Greco will be back. You know, Sal, what are the dangers of decriminalizing certain offenses?
So what lies in criminal offenses for what?
Let's say for marijuana, for the drugs that they're talking about, lessening sentences for juvenile services. You've got these juveniles who, when it comes to the charging, juvenile services, particularly in places like Maryland, it's not the judges or the commissions that decide, the Department of Juvenile Services decide, because what they want to do is protect the youth, and a lot of these youth go out and commit some of the same repeat petty crimes again and again and again, and these crimes just continue to rise.
Yeah, I think actually Leonard always points out to the stats of this. The issue again with this again is I guess they always thought that they can arrest their way out of a situation and just incarcerate people. And that's not the answer. Community outreach is something that's very big. Some departments, some communities are getting better at it. But the problem is, like you mentioned, Maryland. So we have Baltimore, which essentially is almost like a failed city where the crime is through the roof. The leaders there neglect everything, and they kind of walk around like they do in New York City, acting like everything is okay. When really, the answers are simple. You need community outreach. You need to have programs, not only in schools. You have to take people, do the after-school programs like sports, have these getaways where you take children to libraries, you take children to a baseball game, something like that, so there's this camaraderie. And you got to get them away from the mentality of hanging out on that corner with the shady people that are hanging out there, or even a lot of these video games too, Armstrong. Back in our time, we used to play stickball outside. We had camaraderie with our neighbors, and that system is what would work today. And the outreach, although it's there, you need more. And that's where, if I was a mayor of a town, would pump money into something like that and put a lot of money into programs like that, and that would help the juveniles and the youth out of these issues where they're rubbing elbows with the wrong people, and we need them to get back to what? Almost like entertaining themselves, going out with other children, and there's camaraderie, and they won't go down that dark path. That seems to be the issue. But arresting our way out of this problem is not the way forward. It's a failed system, and they really need to go back on that and really look at, the stats, which Leonard always has. So I'm sure Leonard has the stats on this.
I do know that we have a data transparency problem when it comes to tracking the real crime numbers. But, it's interesting. I was listening to Sal, Leonard, and what is fascinating is that every society get the criminals they deserve.
True. And it's because society, look, as far as I'm concerned, it's not law enforcement, it's not the mayors, it's basically society and families that judge the level of crime that we have in this country. I don't disagree with Sal in terms of programs. I'd love to have programs for younger people and for juveniles. But the bottom line is that we have a society that beats the hell out of their kids, neglects the hell out of our kids, sexually violates our kids, and then we throw them out in society and expect them not to commit crimes. It doesn't work that way. What we have is massive child abuse and neglect in this country, and until we recognize that, I think that's the key issue. It's not so much the criminal justice system. People always say, okay, it's the mayor's responsibility. It's the responsibility of the cops. No, it's not. It's the responsibility of society to police itself. And so, look, until we finally admit to the fact that we control our own actions, you can't go ahead and violate a woman just because there's a certain sense of vulnerability. Society needs to stand up and say, no, that's wrong. We've said it in terms of racism. We've said it in terms of hard drugs. We've said it in terms of drinking and driving. Society needs to control itself.
Sal, it is so true. The police are the public, and the public are the police.
It's true. And Leonard, he is correct. There is a society issue. Like I said, I've said before on your show, you go on, you look online, you have all these people. I get it, entertainment business, there's songs out there, but some of these songs and they're singing about, it's like violence, and these children are impressionable, and they go down, oh, I want to be like whoever that is singing on the television screen. Meanwhile, 40, 50 years ago, they weren't doing that. So again, Leonard has a point, and it is a societal problem. But
why is it that? But why is it that we never get to the root cause of the issue?
Because we don't want to admit the root cause of the issue. The root cause of the issue is the fact that we massively mistreat our kids. When you have data they're showing that the great majority of females caught up in the justice system were sexually victimized as kids. Why do we ignore that? Why does child abuse and neglect get a pass? Why aren't we just basically saying that it's one of the principal drivers of crime and violence in this country? The fact that families are separated, the fact that the father is not there. All of these are indices that criminologists have talked about for decades and decades and decades. You cannot have a safe society unless you have safe kids. You cannot have a safe society unless society polices itself. So, let's take the onus off of the criminal justice system, off the law enforcement, and put it squarely where it belongs. We need to look in the mirror and say that we are responsible for the crime problems and society's problems in this country. We're the ones who decide whether or not we violate somebody either by their race or by their sex, or we're the ones who make up our own minds in terms of how society behaves. And until we come to grips with that, we're never going to have a safe and sane city.
Sal, all crime in the end is the crime of the community. And it reflects back of those societal issues in the community that they refuse to address or try to ignore, cover up, and sometimes enable.
A lot of times there are cover-ups, and I could tell you, Armstrong, I worked in the police department, and as many times, there was one issue I just found. There was an incident in the 40th precinct in the Bronx of child neglect, right? They didn't take the report the right way. They didn't take it serious. Then they ended up arresting the father because they found the child somewhere in a river. So, again, a simple thing like trying to find out what's going on, taking a simple report, and you can't even get that right. So, once again, not only has the society failed this family, but the police did also. And I'm not saying they do it all the time, but sometimes it's an era where they overlook things, they're stressed out. But you can't do that because every incident should be taken seriously. So, it's a combination of things. Again, society, I wish they could change a little bit and at least start to look at things, but that would mean that we need more people being intellectual, start making informed decisions, not being low information, because that's another problem we have in this country, in order to, try to fix this problem.
So you do believe that an ounce of prevention is an ounce of cure?
Correct.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it all makes sense. And you know what? And nothing's going to change unless we address issues. And the problem is they're so simple to address. All we do is complicate them more and more and more because people refuse, because it's somebody they know, somebody they have a relationship. They don't want to see them locked up. They don't want to report them. They want to protect them. And what they end, not only do they end up destroying themselves, they end up destroying and eroding their communities.
Unless people take responsibility for their own actions. I mean, okay, so the guy who's trying to sell you something at a wonderful price, why in the name of God would you buy it? Why would you hurt your fellow man by buying obviously stolen goods? Why would you encourage people to beat up on somebody or bully somebody? Why can't we stand up to the bullies of the world? Why can't we stand up and simply say no? We are going to engage in behavior that is pro-social, in terms of minorities, in terms of women, in terms of everybody in this country. Why can't we be our own brother's keepers? I think Jesus Christ maybe he possibly said something along those lines, treat other people in the way that you would want to be treated. And that's a tenet of every major religion in the world, treating other people as you would want to be treated. Why can't we do that? I mean, it doesn't seem to be that complicated of a problem as long as we're willing to take responsibility for our own actions. We're just too prone to say and point fingers at law enforcement and mayors and government when we're just not willing to point fingers at ourselves.
You know, politics is a poison pill, Sal.
Mm-hmm.
I know that. It's one of the biggest reasons why the systems are so corrupt and nothing ever really gets done. It becomes worse and worse because you can buy and lobby and pay for somebody and they compromise the principles of the law or handicap law enforcement to do their job. It's just the truth.
Yeah, listen, I was a victim of it. I know it all too well. Policing and also politics go hand in hand. The right arm of the politician is the police. So as much as you want them to do the right thing, just keep that and bear that in mind. And politics usually intercedes in everything. So even in an arrest, even in any kind of law enforcement situation, if some kind of political angle is involved in that, you'll see it plays out completely different than what you expect. Same thing with court cases. We just saw those last week with this P. Diddy stuff and now this Epstein thing. It's all politics when really we just expect the law to be either he guilty or not guilty and also have due process. Some people don't have that either. But again, politics interjects into everything and it's unfortunate.
But what happens?
We need to keep it out of
What happens if it doesn't change?
Well, it's getting worse because you're seeing that now. Doesn't matter who's in charge, Armstrong. People like to weaponize justice departments. And without mentioning names, we've seen the last few administrations, you could see signs of that. When people just want accountability for actions, we don't want retribution. So I wish we kind of like scale back all of that and kind of go back to that because that's what I thought we were getting. That's what the people want. But, you know, everyone has their own agenda. Some in the Justice Department on their own have agendas. So, again, you need to scale it back and bring Lady Justice out and follow what the intention of law and order really meant for this country with the forefathers.
Unfortunately, Leonard, and you have the final comment before I say goodbye to you and Sal, justice is not blind. It's political.
It never has been blind, but that's the point of those of us who are of goodwill. We stand up for the other person. Justice has never been blind. There are all sorts of groups in this country that have been beaten up by the justice system, beaten up by law enforcement in the past. But that seems to be improving dramatically. There seems to be a new recognition of law enforcement as being something that is in our best interest, and support for law enforcement has risen because I think law enforcement has become a moderating force in society. Look, people are respecting law enforcement more than ever before, but the past in law enforcement, the story is pretty brutal, and we can't shy away from that fact. There's good news and bad news all at the same time.
You know, when we come back, Dr. Shawn Joseph, who's the interim superintendent of Prince George's County, will be joining us to talk about after-school funding in Maryland. Listen, Sal, it's always a pleasure to have you on. I wish you well with your lawsuit. It's sad that you're being punished for just wanting to serve your community, and so it's politics. And you know, and you're just representative of so many law enforcement officers and other people in policy positions and positions like yours that go through very similar. When you do your job, sometimes you pay a price that's beyond your comprehension. It's why people choose not to go into law enforcement and why law enforcement continues to fail us. And Leonard, thank you so much for what you do. Your voice, your future. I'm Armstrong Williams, and we'll be back.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence. There's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion. and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. Dr. Joseph, welcome to the broadcast. I think leaders should always regularly ask themselves questions about their own biases, the impact of their decisions on different student groups and different aspects of leadership in that school to make sure that they're not biased in their decisions. How do leaders address that within themselves and their own biases?
Yeah, that's a great question, and thank you for having me. I think first, leaders need to be clear about what they want to accomplish, and they have to be clear about who they're serving. And I think when you're going out and you're meeting with your community, you're getting input from the community, and you're co-creating the plans. You're not doing it by yourself. You can eliminate some of the bias, particularly if you have diverse groups supporting you in that decision-making process. So that collaboration is key. It's one of the reasons why in Prince George's County public schools, we're really focusing on bringing parents to the table, a diverse group, so we can get it right for the diverse needs of our students.
How do your personal experiences shape your view on what equity in schools should look like?
Yeah. I mean, I think your personal experiences definitely shape your leadership profile. I mean, that's clear. But I also think, again, what's important is having a diversity of thought and having a diversity of people around the table as you push towards the goals, particularly looking at your diversity of your students and asking, what will it take to move all students from all backgrounds forward? And coming up with a plan to do that is critical and can be done. And you've got to be willing to listen and recognize sometimes you hear things that you don't necessarily agree with, but it could be because you've got a totally different perspective. And I think if you respect people, listen deeply to people, and work to move building consensus, you can lead in a right way, which helps everybody kind of buy into your leadership and move forward.
I think that's interesting because I would ask, what does equity mean in the context of our school community beyond just academic development?
Yeah, equity means, I think, understanding where people are. Like when I look at equity, I look at what's the goal we're trying to accomplish, where are people at in those goals, and what will it take in terms of resources, whether that's money, time, effort, to get everyone moving to achieve those goals. So, some individuals, some situations might require more resource because they're further behind. And if that's the case, I mean, it's appropriate to provide the adequate resource to achieve that goal that you're looking forward.
I know we want to talk about the withholding of federal funds that affect the students that need it the most, but there are students that thrive, and then there are those that struggle, not because of, but in spite of the resources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. But I think, we have to pay attention to where students are and what those needs are, and how we go about getting them the resources that they need. Well, while it's true, some students achieve in spite of resources. Many students without resources will definitely fall behind and fall
And
further.
how are you defining resources?
Yeah, I'm defining resources by money, by time, opportunity, access. Many students don't even have access to opportunities, and for example, some students who live in Prince George's County may have never gone off to a Montgomery County or off to a Frederick because they don't have the transportation to get them there. So that's a resource as well.
But isn't it one of the most critical resources are parents reinforcing the learning environment at home?
Yeah, parents are extremely important. It's one of the reasons, as I've assumed the interim superintendency in Prince George's County, one of the very first things I said we must do is engage parents. I said it's a free resource, and it's one of our most valuable resources to help students be successful.
What's the connection between after-school programs and long-term student success? As in, your 100-day plan emphasizes equity and community engagement. How do you rebuild trust when these programs are cut?
Yeah, I think for us, the funding is critical. We are a district that is 60% of our students, come from very humble beginnings. As we work to accelerate students, one of the ways we're able to do that is to extend our programming. But if we don't have some of these federal dollars, it makes it very difficult to extend the time that's needed for students to be able to excel. So we're very concerned. In Prince George's County, our budget is about 12% of our budget comes from the federal government, and that's a big chunk of dollars. And we have to figure out how we can ensure that students get the extended time, the extended supports needed to catch up.
Walk us through the resources that have been cut and where it's having its greatest impact.
Well, at this time, I'm on day 4 in the school system, so I am working to meet with our federal programs people to look at.
So I get that quickly. So what reforms are most urgent for you in Prince George's County?
Mm-hmm. Right now, one, we've got to get our parents engaged. I think that's critical for us. 2, we've got to understand and answer the question, are students making adequate growth in our schools in reading and math? If not, why not? If so, what are we doing to make that happen? And more importantly, if students are accelerating, what can we learn from the students that are doing extremely well in the district so we can scale our supports? We've got to prioritize getting high quality staff in front of all students in all buildings, because we have had challenges with ensuring that we have adequate staffing. We bring in about 1,000 new teachers a year. And that's a tremendous task, trying to find high quality teachers to fill all of those vacancies. So that's a lot of work.
So how do you hold school districts and governments accountable for funding outcomes, not just intentions?
Mm-hmm. One of the things you have to evaluate, are you getting a return on investment with the that you're spending? And that's one of the things, if you look at my plan, you see I lock in to say we're spending dollars. How do we know that spending is having an impact? And if it's not having an impact, what do we stop? And when we are seeing impact, how do we scale those programs?
And Dr. Joseph, what do you bring to your leadership that's unique, that is so different than what was had before? What do you see as your uniqueness to change much of what we're talking about tonight?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I do is I work to listen deeply, and I make sure I bring the people closest to the work. I make sure those people are at the table, the decision-making table. I think that's very important. I pay attention to, again, return on investment. If we're spending dollars, how do we know we're getting those outcomes? We also have to have a clear vision. Like, we got to be clear about what we're doing first, second, and third. Look, research on schools, and the successful schools, as talked about, you've got to have a safe environment. There has to be strong instructional leadership. You've got to get your principals actively involved. You've got to have a clear vision, pay attention to how you're using time, and be clear about what you're monitoring. I have been successful over the course of my 30 years now, paying attention to those variables to get better outcomes for kids.
Does the blueprint for Maryland's future go far enough, or is it failing to meet the urgency of now?
No, I think the blueprint definitely meets the urgency of now, as it forces us and challenges us to make investments in early childhood education. It ensures that we have high quality staffing, that we're focusing on our college and career readiness. I think it's definitely forcing us to push. And I think it's an opportunity, for us to really lead the nation. I mean, there are very few states that have invested, billions of additional dollars in helping districts get it right.
Well, let me wrap with this to you, and we're certainly honored to have you join in the broadcast tonight. You've stepped into leadership during a very challenging time. How are you balancing crisis management with the vision that you're laying out tonight?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I think Prince George's County is a wonderful county with very capable people, and I think the stars are aligning within our district from the top down, from the county executive's office to the council to the school system, to be clear about what needs to happen and how we need to move forward. So I think for me, it's really about execution in this moment. We have a clear plan, but now we've got to rally everybody to execute on that plan, to be honest and accountable about what's working, what's not working, and to make the appropriate adjustments for us to continue to move forward.
Well, we certainly wish you well, Dr. Shawn Joseph, and as you progress, we hope to have you back on the platform to discuss that. Thank you for joining us, and when we return, MAHA will be in the house. Don't go away.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
And welcome back to the broadcast. From music charts to spiritual awakening, Jimmy Levy's journey is a reflection of a cultural and personal transformation that resonates with a growing number of young Americans. Emilie Hagan, journalist and author of the recent Substack piece on Levy, joins us to explore how his story is part of a broader conversation around identity, faith, resistance to mainstream narratives, and the power of voices in today's cultural wars. Ms. Hagan, MAHA reporter, contributor, welcome to the show. What drew you to Levy's story, and why now?
So we ran this story because we feel like it's really important to have voices like Jimmy's in the movement, because there's so many people like me that have a strange relationship with food, and he was really open and honest about that. A lot of people aren't willing to admit that, and I think admitting that, yeah, we have problems in America, and having voices like him kind of come forward and say it, it will influence other people to like try harder.
Well, tell us, Denai, for those that have never heard of Jimmy Levy, more about him.
So I got the pleasure of meeting Jimmy at Palm Beach on election night. He took the stage, he started singing. I was like, what, whose voice is that? He was incredible. And then we developed a friendship, and I was like, you know what? He's perfect for the MAHA movement because he's lost 200 pounds in, I think it was a year. So everybody, everywhere we went, he would be performing at different MAHA events, different political, like for anti-establishment resistance movements throughout the country. And I was like, we need a voice like that. So we got to know each other, and everywhere we go, people are like, how did he lose weight? And people assume it's Ozempic, but his story was very odd and very, very Jimmy.
What's your strange relationship with food?
I think, you know, I grew up in the era where we were given tabloids and we were told we have to look a certain way. So my whole life I was thriving to look like the girls on the Victoria's Secret bags. It never happened, but I was trying to, you know, I was striving for that. So I've always kind of had a weird relationship where I overdo it. Like I will starve myself, then I'll binge, and it's just this yo-yo diet. And to be honest, to this day, I have not figured it out. So talking to Jimmy was really helpful because he also, he had a similar struggle and he was willing to overcome it.
How does Jimmy represent a cultural countercurrent, especially among Gen Z? And what is his story saying about the relationship between faith and fame today?
I think the interesting part about Jimmy is he was on American Idol. He was offered deals in the music industry, but he rejects Hollywood. He wants to stand up to the man. He wants to do his own thing, carve his own path, and he's not afraid to use his voice to speak out against the things that the Hollywood celebrities are told to say. So he's one of the first, I guess, singers that is willing to put their political views on the line, and they're not afraid that it's gonna hurt their chances of getting a music career. He's like, I'm just gonna do it my own way.
Is his music part of a larger spiritual or political reawakening, Ms. Hagan?
I think so, definitely. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but he just started infiltrating nightclubs. So he goes to Miami and he's playing a whole new genre of music, and it's like Christian house music. So he's fusing Christian with house, and that's a genre that we've never really heard before. And there's people like partying at the club and they don't realize that they're jamming out to a Christian soundtrack, which I think is pretty unique.
How is cancel culture affecting independent voices in the music industry?
I think right now, you know, we've seen it with Ye. I think once he spoke out, he lost everything. People have their point of views on that, but he basically said all celebrities are controlled. And I think a lot of people, they believe, like Jimmy, they believe that in order to get really far in the music industry, you have to sacrifice your beliefs and you have to say what the labels want you to say. So artists are now trying to figure out how they can make it without like sacrificing how they feel. Because right now, every single singer, they have the same exact beliefs. You know, Beyonce told us how to vote. J-Lo told us how to vote. Do they really mean it, or are they being told to tell us that? And I think Jimmy's someone that questions that, and it makes people like me wonder, what is really going on up there? What is going on in the music industry?
It's funny hearing you refer to Kanye as Ye and not Ye. I had to stop a minute, and then I realized you were talking about Kanye. You know, where is Jimmy now in terms of his struggle with weight?
Jimmy, I think he's at his goal weight right now. I think right now he's trying to build muscle. So he's lost like 200 pounds, and I think he's kept it off. He looks great. I don't know if he's still struggling, but I'm sure it's a daily struggle, especially someone that has had a strange relationship with food. So in the article, Jimmy talks about how he used to go to McDonald's and order every single item on the menu just because like it was more of a mental block. And then once he gave up his, once he found God is when he realized like, wait, I'm using food, that's a sin too. And he was kind of using food as a drug. So that's when he really was able to tap into where he is now. But he had to find God in order to do that. He wasn't able to lose the weight until he really surrendered himself to Jesus.
Finding God, that's a great thing. And do you think Jimmy's story of finding God sort of scares the mainstream about artists like Jimmy?
Yeah, and I think the parallel with Ye is people didn't like when he did the Jesus is King stuff. When he started that Sunday service, he got a lot of backlash. People did not like to see someone do Christianity in music.
You know, how does his personal journey reflect broader trends in mental health, masculinity, and purpose? There he is.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I mean, I think we have a mental health crisis in America, but I also don't know how to solve it. But I do think just what Jimmy did is great. Whenever you feel good in your body, usually it resonates up here too. So I feel like the mind, body, and spirit is connected, and he's a perfect example of that. He said he feels a lot better now in his body. He's happier, he's lighter, he's shining. And I think, yeah, I wish I could be as disciplined as Jimmy.
Tell us more about MAHA, your involvement there, how that plays in these stories. And because in reporting this story, did you sense that Jimmy's audience is hungry for something deeper than just music? And this is part of the MAHA movement, which is fascinating, actually.
Yeah, I think I was brought on to write articles for the MAHA report. I'm a contributor because I'm a millennial that struggles with MAHA. You know, I grew up on red dye, Huggies, tons of sugar. I was having like hundreds of grams of sugar a day. My parents didn't know any better. And now I'm at the point where I know I shouldn't, but I feel like I'm the voice for the people that don't live on a biodynamic farm. They don't have access to chlorophyll water every single minute of the day. So I'm someone that tries to find people like Jimmy that can relate to people like me and all the other people struggling in Gen Z and other generations. You know what I mean? I'm trying my best, but I can't say I'm definitely not a perfect MAHA person.
But listen, you're evolving. You know, it's interesting how faith has become a form of rebellion for some artists in the current cultural moment.
Yeah, which is wild. You'd think it'd be the opposite. You'd think, you know, worshiping Satan would be the rebel, but now it's the opposite. When you worship God, you're seen as this wild rebel in music, which I think is wild.
You know, Jimmy often speaks about spiritual warfare, and how do you interpret that, and how does it connect with his fans?
I think the reason Jimmy's so popular is not just because he has a great voice, but it's because he talks about spiritual warfare in his music. And I think right now, people can feel that there's a shift happening in society. And I do think that we are experiencing spiritual warfare. I don't know, no matter what you believe, you can feel that there's something bigger than us that's happening and driving. There's like hidden forces around. And I think Jimmy kind of taps into that mysticism. Well,
I got to tell you, Emilie Hagan, you've been a terrific guest tonight. I bet many people are curious to go out and hear this great voice that you speak of Jimmy Levy. I'm certainly going to go out because I've not heard his voice, I must admit. But I was interested in his story.
He needs to come on the show and sing one of these days.
Oh, I got to check him out. Listen, thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Your Voice in Your Future, and we hope to have you back.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sal. Thank you, Leonard. Thank you, everyone. I'm Armstrong Williams. Good night, everybody.